Hello, ladies and gentlemen. What if I told you that the pain you've endured, the betrayals that broke you, the love that left you hollow, were never meant to define you? What if all of that was nothing more than the fire that forged the real you, the version of yourself that's been waiting quietly for the perfect moment to rise? Tonight, we're diving into a story that speaks directly to the soul, about transformation, strength, and the ultimate freedom that comes when you finally decide to stop chasing after love that isn't meant for you. So, sit back, take a deep breath, and prepare to hear something that might just change everything. You were never hard to love. They were just too broken to hold you. They didn't leave because you were too much. They left because they couldn't hold what was real. You were a mirror, and they were terrified of their reflection. See, most people walk around shattered inside, their hearts full of sharp edges, cutting anything that dares to love them deeply. They think they want intimacy, but when it shows up, steady, unflinching, honest, they recoil like it's fire. Because real love doesn't stroke the ego. It dismantles the mask. And that's what you were. Not a lover, not a partner, but a catalyst. You didn't just love them. You saw them. You held space for their chaos, their shadows, their unloved parts. And that scared the hell out of them. Not because you were dangerous, but because you were safe. And safe feels foreign to people raised in emotional war zones. Understand this, it was never your intensity that broke them. It was their inability to meet themselves that made them run. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." You, my friend, were a soul mirror. And mirrors make cowards nervous. They didn't leave because you were unlovable. They left because you loved without conditions. And they only knew how to earn affection through performance. So they told themselves stories that you were too much, too emotional, too sensitive, too deep. But let's call it what it really was. They were too unequipped, too disconnected from their own heart to recognize the value of yours. You weren't hard to love. You were just hard to manipulate. And that's why they turned cold. Because the moment you stopped shrinking, the moment you stopped apologizing for your emotional richness, you became a threat. They didn't want a partner. They wanted a projection screen, someone to play the role, not rewrite the script. But you couldn't play small. You couldn't pretend. And that's your gift and your curse. You're not built for surface level. You were born with an ocean inside you, and they only had the capacity for puddles. So don't shrink to fit into someone's shallow version of love. You weren't made to be half-held. Nietzsche said, "And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music." You danced in truth. They couldn't even hear the rhythm. Let them go. Let the ones who were never meant to meet your depth drift away. Because love, real love, doesn't flinch when it sees your shadows. It doesn't shut down when you're vulnerable. It leans in. And you deserve the kind of love that stays when your hands are shaking. The kind that chooses you when you're too tired to perform. The kind that holds you when the voices in your head get too loud. But here's the secret. Before anyone else can give you that love, you have to give it to yourself. You have to become the one who stays, who doesn't abandon yourself every time you feel too much, who doesn't silence your truth to make others comfortable. You have to become the home you were searching for. Because the real tragedy isn't that they left. It's that, for a moment, you believed the lie that their departure meant you were unworthy. But let's get one thing straight. You were never too much. Your presence just demanded honesty. Your love asked for maturity. Your soul required someone who had done the work, and they hadn't. You were a lesson, a test from the universe asking, can you rise to meet this depth, or will you retreat into the familiar comfort of avoidance? They chose avoidance, but you have the power to choose differently. You can alchemize this pain, transmute it, turn rejection into redirection. You can take this heartbreak and forge yourself into something unshakable, not harder, not colder, but truer. Because pain has two paths. It can poison you or it can purify you. You decide. So let this be your becoming. Let every tear water your roots. Let every ache carve new space in your chest for something more honest to bloom. You are not hard to love. You are hard to fool. And that's a blessing. Now rise, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Not with vengeance, but with sovereignty. Because the most powerful thing you can ever do is keep your heart soft in a world that tried to harden it. You are the fire that doesn't burn to destroy. You burn to illuminate. Let them go. Let the story die and become the kind of love that never leaves when things get uncomfortable. Because the one who's meant for you, they won't be afraid of your fire. They'll bring kindling. They'll bring kindling. They'll sit by your flame, not to tame it, but to learn from it, to warm their hands and say, finally, I found someone who burns like I do. But before that person arrives, before that soul collides with yours in a way that doesn't shake, doesn't tremble, doesn't flee, you have to become whole with or without them. Because the real journey isn't about finding someone who loves you. It's about becoming someone who no longer betrays themselves just to be loved. You were taught to fold, to bend your truth into palatable shapes, to dim your light so it wouldn't offend their blindness. But that version of you, the version that edited themselves just to be tolerated, he's gone, she's gone. They died the day you stopped begging to be understood and started honoring your own understanding. And this grief you carry, it's sacred. It means the false self is burning away. This ache, it's your old self cracking under the pressure of a new becoming. Carl Jung called it individuation, the sacred path of becoming your most integrated self, not the self society demanded. Not the version your parents preferred, but the one you buried beneath the years of shoulds. That self is rising now, not because they left, but because their absence created space for your essence. They thought they were abandoning you, but they were unknowingly setting you free. You see, some endings are not punishments, they're initiations. Pain isn't always here to break you. Sometimes it's here to wake you up to your worth, to your capacity, to your inner storm, the one you kept suppressing just to keep the peace. But no more peace treaties with your own suppression, no more negotiations with self-betrayal. Let the war inside you end, not by conquering your emotions, but by listening to them. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So look at the pain. Really look. What did their absence teach you? That your love was real, that your loyalty was deep, that your presence was a gift. You weren't broken. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't hold a heart as unfiltered as yours. They didn't have the language for your love, but that doesn't mean you go silent. You speak louder, not with noise, but with being. You embody the love you were denied. You become it, not for them, but for you. Because here's the paradox. The moment you stop chasing love, the moment you stop begging for closure, the moment you sit still with your pain long enough to name it, you become free. And from that freedom, a new love will be born. A self-love that isn't loud, isn't performative, but anchored. A love that doesn't need validation because it's rooted in truth. That's what Jung meant when he spoke of wholeness, not perfection, not being fixed, but integrating the mess, the madness, the shadow, until even your pain feels like home. And that's when the right ones find you, not because you were looking, but because your light became undeniable. You stopped dimming, stopped folding, stopped fitting into stories too small for your soul. You became the flame. And those who aren't afraid of fire, they'll find you and they'll stay. Not because they need to be saved, not because they want to save you, but because they've walked through their own fires too. They've buried versions of themselves just like you have. They've bled in silence. They've learned how to hold pain without flinching. And when you meet them, you won't need to prove your worth. You'll just know. Because real love doesn't ask you to sacrifice your wholeness. It celebrates it. And until that day arrives, become the kind of person your younger self needed. The kind who doesn't walk away when things get difficult. The kind who stands by their own side, no matter how heavy the storm. You are not too much. You are exactly enough. And the ones meant for you will never need you to shrink. They will love you in the full expanse of your becoming. So grieve. Grieve not just the person, but the version of you who tolerated what you didn't deserve. Grieve the silence you sat in. Grieve the nights you questioned your worth because they couldn't see it. But then rise, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in truth. Because that's what healing really is. Not forgetting, not pretending it didn't hurt, but remembering yourself before the world told you who to be. You see, Nietzsche said, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. That chaos you feel, that ache in your chest, it's not a weakness, it's potential. The star is forming. You are not broken, you are becoming. And when you emerge from this, when the dust settles, when the tears dry, when the echo of their absence no longer hurts, you will thank the pain. Not because it was fair, not because it was kind, but because it brought you back to yourself. And that is the rarest kind of gift. Most people live their whole lives running from themselves, numbing, distracting, pleasing, but not you. You faced the fire. You walked through it. You didn't just survive. You transformed. That's the power of inner work. That's the miracle of becoming whole. Not fixing yourself, but finding yourself. And when you get there, when you stand at the edge of your own becoming and look back at all you've endured, you'll realize it was never about getting them to stay. It was always about learning how to stay with yourself. Because you were never too much. You were simply too real for a world still learning how to feel. So keep your heart open, but guard it with wisdom. Love deeply, but never at the expense of your soul. And remember this, you are not here to be chosen. You are here to choose yourself again and again and again until it's no longer a decision, but a way of life. Let them go. Let you grow. Because the real story isn't about who walked away. It's about who you became when they did. And the world has yet to meet the version of you that rises from this. But oh, when they do, they'll know. They'll feel it in your presence. They'll hear it in your voice. They'll see it in your eyes. The pain didn't break you. It built you. And now you walk like someone who knows they are the miracle. Because here's the truth. No one tells you. You don't heal by going back. You heal by going deeper. By standing in the ashes of who you were and choosing to rise anyway. You don't find peace by avoiding the pain. You find peace by facing it, by letting it burn everything false until only the real you remains. You know, Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." So choose wisely. Choose to love yourself in ways no one ever taught you. Choose to validate your own pain instead of begging others to understand it. Choose to forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. And choose to stay awake, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because this life, it's not about avoiding heartbreak. It's about discovering who you really are when everything you clung to falls away. And when it does, you'll see something most never do. That heartbreak is not the end of your story. It's the birthplace of your power. It's where the false self dies and the real one is born. You are not just surviving the loss. You are remembering the wholeness that was always inside you. And when you finally meet that version of yourself, the one who needed no permission, no approval, no saving, you'll realize something breathtaking. You were never healing to become someone new. You were healing to return to someone ancient, someone timeless, someone sacred, someone you. So let them wonder what changed. Let them feel your distance, your silence, your light. Let them feel your absence like a reckoning. Because you're not who you were before. You're no longer begging to be seen. You've become someone who sees themselves with clarity, with reverence, with unwavering grace. And that is the fiercest kind of freedom. You're not chasing love anymore. You are love. You're not hoping to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And that's not a recovery. That's a rebirth. Because this was never about revenge, never about proving them wrong. This was about proving yourself right, proving that you could rise even when no one offered you a hand, proving that your scars didn't make you broken, they made you real, that your silence isn't emptiness, it's power under control, that walking away wasn't weakness, it was sacred rebellion. A quiet revolution where you finally chose you. You chose peace over chaos, dignity over drama, healing over history. You stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped handing out your heart like a pamphlet to those who couldn't even read your worth. And in that moment, you became untouchable. Not because you're perfect, but because you're whole. Because you learned the art of being alone without being lonely. You found stillness in solitude and music in the silence. You're not chasing connection anymore. You're attracting alignment. People who see you, not as a reflection of what they need, but as the soul you truly are. And now, you no longer need to scream to be heard. Your presence speaks louder than words. You no longer need to prove your worth. Your energy tells the story. And your story, it's not about the pain. It's about the alchemist who turned it into power, the warrior who made peace with the shadows, the soul who learned how to carry fire without burning themselves. So don't apologize for who you've become. Don't soften your truth to make others comfortable. Don't dim your light for rooms that fear the flame, because the version of you who survived deserves to shine. Let this be your era of embodiment, of walking in your truth, standing in your worth and moving through the world like you finally remember who you are. Because you are not a victim. You are not what they did. You are not the stories they told about you. You are the author now. And this chapter, it's called I Came Back Home to Myself. So if they ever come back, if they ever try to re-enter your peace, wearing the same mask they wore when they shattered it, let your silence greet them. Let your healed energy do the talking. Because you don't owe them access just because they remember your warmth. Let them feel the absence of the you who once tolerated what broke you. Let them meet the version of you who no longer bends just to be kept, who no longer performs softness for people who only loved you when you were silent. You are no longer trying to fit in spaces that feel like shrinking. You're not at war with the past anymore. You're just done returning to it. And that's what they'll never understand. Your power didn't come from becoming someone new. It came from returning to who you were before the world convinced you to shrink. That's the real glow up. Not louder, not meaner, not colder, just realer, softer in the right places, sharper in the right boundaries. And now, when you walk into a room, you don't beg to be seen. You walk like the storm you once prayed would save you. You walk like the truth they tried to bury. You walk like the mirror they can't look into. Because once you learn to protect your peace, to love yourself without apology, to stand alone and still feel full, you become the one thing this world can't control. A soul that belongs to itself. Because when you belong to yourself, you stop performing pain for attention. You stop explaining your peace to people who feed off chaos. You stop shrinking just to be held. And here's the truth they'll never say out loud. They miss the version of you who didn't know their love was conditional, who gave without measure, who stayed when it hurt, who said, it's okay, even when it wasn't. But that version of you, he's gone. She's evolved. They've ascended. Now your silence is sacred. Your no is a full sentence. Your boundaries aren't walls. They're altars to your self-worth. And healing didn't make you colder. It made you clearer. It taught you how to love without losing yourself, how to give without bleeding, how to care without carrying someone else's storm. Now, when people ask who you are, you don't list your pain. You don't list your past. You don't list all the times you were betrayed. You just say, I am the fire that forgave itself. You are no longer chasing closure, no longer waiting for apologies that will never come, no longer watering gardens in people who never planted anything in you. You've learned the most powerful truth of all. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table, especially those who only show up when they're hungry. And in this new chapter, you don't need revenge. You don't need validation. You don't need to be understood. All you need is you, fully, fiercely, finally, because you were never too much. They were just never ready. So let them wonder, let them whisper, let them miss the version of you they once mishandled. And while they're stuck in their patterns, you'll be out there building peace so deep that chaos drowns in it. This is your rebirth. Not loud, not public, not for show. Just quietly powerful and unapologetically yours. So here you are, not bitter, not broken, but reborn. You've outgrown the versions of you that begged to be seen. You've buried the parts that believed love had to hurt to be real. You've peeled off the masks you wore to survive. And now you live. Not for their approval, not for their applause, but for your own breath, your own becoming. Because this journey, it was never about being liked. It was never about being chosen. It was about remembering you were never meant to blend in. You were always meant to rise, wild, raw, unshakable. And look at you now, still soft, still kind, still loving, but no longer available to people who treat your heart like a convenience. No longer reachable by those who only dial your number when their life goes dark. No longer willing to sacrifice your peace just to keep the wrong people comfortable. You've become the thing they fear most, a person who no longer needs them to feel whole. And that is the kind of freedom they'll never understand.